What is up? GoodMicWork back at you again with another impromptu special commentary. What the hell is going on here? First, I come up the other night and talk about boxing. Now I'm going to come up here and talk about the UFC. It's very rare for me to do these short breaking news type of commentaries, but luckily a lot of this stuff has happened on a couple of days where I have some spare time. So I figured let's come up here again and talk about the big news that was dropped last night at UFC 199, and that is Brock Lesnar, current WWE superstar, is going to be competing at the next UFC pay-per-view, UFC 200, on July 9th. That is unbelievable. I didn't even know what to make of this when I first started reading it on Twitter. I thought that it had to be some sort of a rumor, or maybe that Brock was going to return to UFC sometime in the future, and when his current WWE deal is up, he's going to go back to MMA. The announcement was finally officially made on the UFC pay-per-view, and then WWE confirmed it. I think it broke a little bit earlier, a couple of hours earlier. I read a story where a few reporters were thrown out and banned for life from all UFC events for leaking this information. I think UFC wanted to be the ones to make this announcement. But clearly, a big deal has been worked out between the UFC and the WWE. This could turn out to be, just kind of a one-time type of deal, or it could be the beginning of a lot of changes in our business. I mean, this partnership and this cooperation between the two companies, Dana White and Vince McMahon and Brock Lesnar, to even allow this to happen is an enormous risk, I think, by both companies, but it's a big risk that could pay off, in unbelievable ways financially for both of these promotions. It could also backfire and, ruin everything for a lot of people involved as well. So when you think about Brock returning to the UFC, you're wondering what brought this about. I'm thinking this is more of a now or never type of thing. Brock is in no way old, and he's still an amazing athlete and a freak of nature. But at the same time, you can't be working in MMA and having a UFC career, too far into your 40s. I mean, I know a few guys do it, and if anybody could, Brock could. But if Brock ever wanted to make one more run or take one more stab at the UFC when he's completely healthy, because he had the illness last time around, he probably is thinking that he better do it now. So I'm wondering if this is something new that was brought up in his contract, or if this was the deal all along, that when he re-signed after WrestleMania 30 or 31 or whatever it was, that he was allowed to maybe go do a fight for UFC. And if that's the case, that's a first. I mean, for Vince McMahon to even allow that to happen is pretty amazing. We've seen some cooperation between UFC and WWE in the past, dating all the way back to the Dan Severn days, and all the way up to most recently with Ronda Rousey being involved in WWE a little bit. So it's probably in both companies' best interest to stay on good terms with each other. But this is unbelievable. I mean, this news was all over mainstream media. It was all over ESPN, SportsCenter, you name it. Everybody was talking about this. Brock Lesnar is a huge name, and he's responsible, I think, for the biggest drawing UFC pay-per-view in history. So obviously, if they have a chance to get him, they know they're going to draw an unbelievable buy rate. And if the WWE sends him over there and he's successful, that just adds to the legacy that he's built in the WWE of just being this unstoppable beast. So you have to wonder, who are they going to put him in the ring with? And this is where it kind of gets funny, because I'm not a UFC expert, and I know there's politics and stuff involved when it comes to choosing opponents and putting guys with each other, because you want to make for the best TV, the best matches, the best drama. And I think that's why a lot of people are angry that CM Punk got into UFC, because they're going to put him on one of their main cards on a big show and rely on him to draw a huge buy rate when he hasn't paid his dues like some of the other hardworking fighters may have. So you start getting into this area here where UFC is a little bit like pro wrestling in the sense that they line up jobbers for guys sometimes. And you got to know that Brock Lesnar's opponent absolutely must be somebody that he can defeat. And you would think that Vince McMahon would have a say or maybe some input on who that opponent would be. He's probably like, look, Dana, just pick some schmuck for Brock to destroy. You win, I win. I know this is being billed as a one-time deal, a one-off for Brock Lesnar, but I think it's just a one-time deal for right now. Depending on what happens in the fight is going to determine probably if Brock ever does this again, because if he's successful and annihilates this guy, the fans are going to want to see him again. The media is going to treat this as in, wow, Brock Lesnar is back. Surely he's got to get another match here. He could be a world title contender. And then you do this a couple of more times, and Brock could be fucking UFC champion one day. So I think this is just the beginning. If he wants to come back and have one more fight and win one more fight and retire as a winner, maybe that's the case. But when we're talking about the amount of money that we're talking about, I don't think anybody that should automatically believe that this will be the last time Brock ever gets in the octagon. I think it depends on what happens in the fight. And like I said, if he wins, I don't see how you cannot see him back in the UFC again for another fight at some point. And then when he wins, think about what that does as his draw in the WWE. I mean, this is unprecedented. This guy technically is under contract to both companies, and he's getting massive paydays, probably the biggest paydays possible from both companies at the same time. I mean, that's ridiculous. And Brock Lesnar is going to be at SummerSlam. So if he beats the hell out of some guy at UFC 200 and then comes to SummerSlam a month later to do something, I don't know, you would think you might want to put the belt back on him, you know, just to capitalize off of the momentum and all the publicity he's gotten from his UFC return and his victory. So, you know, I think a lot depends on UFC. I mean, for the first time ever, a UFC match could determine the fate of the WWE World title when you think about it. So I'm excited for this in a weird way. I'm excited because it's something that we haven't seen, really. I mean, we've seen a little bit of cooperation with WWE and UFC and even WWE and TNA a time or two, but nothing on this level. I mean, I'm trying to think back to the Monday Night Wars. I'm thinking back to Monday Night Raw versus Monday Nitro. And WWE struck a deal to send The Rock over to Nitro or something like that for one night. I mean, think about how crazy that would be. Or have Hulk Hogan, when he was on top of the NWO, come over to Raw for one night to work one match. You know, that's the only thing I can equate it to as far as how big this is, because, you know, UFC and WWE, yes, they're different, but they're also very much the same, and whether they like it or not, they are competitors. And just to see them cooperating on a scale like this is pretty awesome, I think, for a fan. There's a lot of UFC guys that I think would be great in WWE. Maybe when some of them retire or decide they don't want to fight anymore, they could make great athletes and great WWE wrestlers. You look at somebody like Conor McGregor, and I'm sure a ton others. I'm not that familiar with a lot of the UFC stars, but I'm sure a lot of you can name a lot more guys than I can as far as guys that would make great WWE superstars. So if you start bridging these two companies, where you're going to see a lot more mixed martial artists transitioning into wrestling than you are football players. So, you know, if this pays off, it could be huge for both companies. And one thing I haven't talked about yet is if it does not pay off, what if Brock Lesnar goes out there and gets beat? I don't want to see that. This is where the risk part comes in. Yes, I'm excited for this whole thing to happen, but if Brock Lesnar were to lose, it would devastate me. For no other reason than the fact that The Undertaker lost his WrestleMania streak to Brock Lesnar, and he's the only guy to ever beat him. If Brock goes out there and gets the shit kicked out of him, he no longer looks like that badass guy that is capable of defeating the streak, and then that tarnishes The Undertaker's WrestleMania record. Think about that. A UFC match could have an effect on a WWE icon's legacy. I mean, not really, sort of indirectly. Some people still wouldn't even care that Brock lost. You know, he's still awesome, and him beating the streak would be fine with some people, but I think it would hurt Undertaker. But then again, if Brock Lesnar goes out there and kicks ass in the UFC, it just makes him look that much stronger. So if this truly does turn out to be a one-time deal only, you know, Vince might say, hey, let me send Brock back to the UFC one more time. Dana White can set up some schmuck for him to destroy, and then he can come back to me looking all that much bigger and reinforcing the legacy that he already built for himself before he got here in the UFC. You know, so that could be Vince's main motivation there, is just to give Brock that little boost. He can get it outside the WWE on Dana White's dime, and Brock ends up coming back to the WWE even more credible than he was before. So, you know, I can see why it's a risk worth taking, and I'm hoping it works out for all parties. I mean, how can you not root for Brock Lesnar? He is such an awesome badass. He is a freak. He is a once-in-a-lifetime performer and a once-in-a-lifetime draw, and I want to see him succeed in both companies, because nobody's going to be able to go out there and do what he has accomplished, you know, conquer both heavyweight titles in both the UFC and the WWE. I mean, it's going to be hard-pressed to find another guy ever coming close to doing something like that. And then we still have CM Punk, you know, who's kind of waiting in the shadows. It's been 2 years almost since he's announced his signing with the UFC, and he still has not had a fight. Brock Lesnar signs with the UFC, and he comes back in 1 fucking month. That just goes to show how unique of an athlete Brock Lesnar truly is. I mean, he's like, fuck it, give me 4 weeks, I'll be ready. You know, CM Punk, we got to root for him too. I'm a little bit worried that he's going to get his ass kicked. I just don't know if he's going to be able to cut it in the UFC, but I want him to, because that would be another guy that wrestling sent over that was successful in the UFC. So, you know, for the sake of wrestling, I want to see these guys succeed. And if you're a pro wrestling fan and you're rooting against either one of these guys, I don't know what the hell's wrong with you. So it's a very interesting situation, to say the least, and it's something that we really haven't seen a lot of, and it could be the beginning of a beautiful friendship between the WWE and UFC. You know, if Ronda Rousey can come back and win her title, she's right back on top, and then you can have all the rumors of her coming into the WWE to do something or have a match at some point. I think she's getting the title shot, isn't she? Against whoever the women's champ is right now. I know Holly Holm was defeated. I forget the girl's name, but I think Rousey gets that match. If Rousey winds up winning, what if they brought Rousey in to end Charlotte's streak as WWE Women's Champion? What if Ronda Rousey held the WWE Women's title and the UFC Women's title simultaneously? I mean, think about that. So I could be reading way too into it, but if WWE is willing to have this agreement about Brock Lesnar, who knows what they can do in the future. So that's all I wanted to come up here and say. Let me know your thoughts on it. Give me all your feelings in the comments section below about how you think this is going to work out and what you think might happen. And GoodMicWork may just have to purchase his very first UFC pay-per-view coming up on July 9th. I'm really excited to see it. So good luck to you, Brock Lesnar. I will be up here tomorrow night. That's the plan anyway. I will be here for Monday Night Raw live tweeting, so feel free to join me at GoodMicWork. And I will most likely come up and do a Raw review after the fact unless we have a really, really shitty show. If it's just as bad as last week, there's a tiny bit of a chance that I could skip it since I've already talked about Muhammad Ali and I've already talked about Brock Lesnar. I don't have to worry about talking about them during the Raw review. So if Raw sucks, what the hell am I going to talk about? But most likely expect me late Monday night, early Tuesday morning with your Monday Night Raw review and anything else that's been going on and any more news regarding Brock Lesnar or the brand extension or anything like that. So you guys have a good rest of your weekend, and I will catch you tomorrow night. Until then, peace.